Time Enough for Sisters is a fanfic based on a comic strip by Doc Wario, aka Jake Lyon if I'm reading the signature correctly. The comic shows Rarity being visited by different versions of herself from the future, all trying to give her advice about fashion trends in advance. It's very lighthearted and has a comedic twist at the end, but the story written by Sparks2037 uses that as a starting point and then goes in a bit more of a serious direction. It begins with Rarity upset at Sweetie Belle for ruining one of her outfits, and no, I'm not talking about a certain headdress. As it turns out, this story acknowledges events in the show up until Twilight time, but it was written before For Whom the Sweetie Belle Toils, which explains why in the following scenes, Rarity laments going back to being more neglectful towards her sister despite her promise back in Sisterhood's social. As she's busy working on a new dress, she gets visited by 4 other Rarities, each one from farther in the future, and of course each one giving her fashion tips. Strangely enough, it kinda makes sense that this is the kind of thing Rarity would use time travel for. As all of this is going on, we start to get extra details about the future, how Sweetie Belle ended up being a genius who made the time travel amulet. She also learned how to teleport farther than any other unicorn, all the way to the Changeling Empire. With Celestia's help, an alliance was formed, but later the Changelings betrayed everyone, starting a war. Finally, the 5th Rarity tells the others to return to their own times before they cause a paradox, but she stays behind and tells her younger self the rest of the details. Apparently, Celestia held a grudge and murdered Chrysalis. Later, Sombra returned. In this story, Sombra was Chrysalis's husband, and under his leadership, the Changelings learn how to feed off of misery instead of love. In her time, the war has resulted in nearly all of Equestria being destroyed. Rarity advises her younger self to try and avoid this by simply being there for Sweetie Belle, and when she makes contact with the Changelings, have her bring Twilight, who, despite her own experience with Chrysalis, is more likely to be rational. Young Rarity points out that if she succeeds, the older version of herself that she's talking to will be erased from existence, but we find out that things are so bad that that's actually preferable to the alternative. And so the story ends with Rarity having a long, happy life with her sister. In this new future, Sweetie Belle never actually invented the time travel amulet, but thankfully this time she never needed to. Time travel stories have a reputation of being inherently messy. Even the best ones like Back to the Future usually have some serious problems that never get resolved. So even though it might seem like a cop-out, it's also kind of refreshing that this story addresses potential logical issues by saying, screw it, it'll all work itself out one way or another. One thing I found distracting though is that the author likes to spam certain French words that Rarity used on the show, and even though I don't speak French myself, it kinda got ridiculous to the point that I found myself thinking,
you keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Also, I have my doubts about saying that Twilight would be more reasonable than Celestia. I kinda think it would be the other way around, but a large part of that is because we still don't know all that much about Celestia. I mean, the Richard Harris Celestia from Season 1 was pretty chill before she was replaced with Michael Gambon's Celestia in Season 2. Still, that's not really the focus of the story anyway. The real focus is on the bond between Rarity and Sweetie Belle, which is kind of ironic since Sweetie Belle hardly ever shows up in the story. And in the end, it illustrates how you can literally make the world a better place just by being there for each other. It's actually the kind of lesson that a good episode of the show would have. I think the transition to the serious tone at the end is a bit jarring, especially with the decidedly silly tone that it starts out with, and despite the lighthearted approach to the time travel element, there are parts of it that are still confusing, so I don't think I would call this a top tier story, but it is very enjoyable, and it moves along at a good pace where it always feels like something new is happening. I would absolutely recommend it. Links to the story on Fanfiction, the posting on Equestria Daily, and the original comic are all listed in the description below.